For the longest time, I've wanted to make my own radiant heat panels. They have multiple benefits over traditional heat sources, such as being safe to the touch. They provide a more gentle, even heating rather than an intense hotspot, which is good for certain reptile species. And because of their low profile, it takes up less room in the enclosure and looks better than most other heat lamps. There aren't many tutorials and information available out there on how to make them, and the few DIY designs I found don't look professional enough for my liking. I'm sure those designs might do the same job and they seem quite cheap and easy to make, but it's just not the look I'm going for in my collection. There are a few criteria I wanted my heat panel design to meet. It has to be splash proof, as I'm using it for green tree pythons, which would need to be sprayed regularly. Low profile, so it looks good and won't take up valuable enclosure climbing space. Contains an indicator to show that the heating is on or off, because the heater itself will not give off any visible light. Projects enough heat even during winter in Melbourne, but still remains safe to the touch to prevent accidental burns. It turned out to be quite a difficult task fulfilling all these criteria. My first few attempts using baking trays were all failures, no matter what metal I used and what heating element I used. They all got very hot to the touch, but barely radiated any heat. This led me into researching a bit more about what is infrared radiation, so that I could understand how I can generate infrared radiation and utilize it. Radiation comes in a wide spectrum of wavelengths, and in the reptile context, it ranges from the UV range, including UVC, which is harmful, UVB, which is beneficial to health, UVA, which is considered a part of the reptile's visible spectrum, and there is the visible color spectrum that we are familiar with. But then as the wavelengths get longer and longer, it starts fading from the visible red light into the invisible spectrum again, hence the name infrared. Just like UV, infrared is also categorized into infrared A, B, and C. The shorter wavelengths of infrared are called infrared A. It is higher in energy and can penetrate deeper into the tissues of animals. It is the reason why the sun feels so good on our skin and why a campfire feels so warm and tingly even on a cold night. It is understood that the further down the wavelength we go away from the infrared A, the less bioavailable it is, meaning that it becomes less usable for living organisms. This is the main theory behind the recent push for certain heating products like the deep heat projectors. It's a lot of interesting research that shows the benefits of infrared A, but unfortunately the conclusion I've made from what I've read was that infrared A can only be generated by something fairly hot. Picture red hot iron and glowing coal. It makes sense why the heating element inside the deep heat projectors give off a very subtle red glow. If I wanted to make a panel that gives off infrared A, it'll either be too unsafe to touch, or have to adopt a similar design as a deep heat projector, where there is a mesh protective guard and quite a lot of space between the heating element and the mesh. But it will no longer be a low profile and compact design. I nearly gave up on this project at that point, but some further research made me think that not all species rely on infrared A. While I won't strip sun-loving species the opportunity to bask under a heat source that provides a visible light and short wavelength infrared, nocturnal reptiles or species that originate from tropical rainforests are unlikely to actively seek the sun. Some don't even thermoregulate and just fluctuate with the ambient temperature. Green tree pythons are not a species that were observed to actively bask under the sun. They are likely reaching their preferred optimal thermal zone from terrestrial radiation. These are long wavelength infrared or infrared C that are re-radiated from the surroundings after being heated up by the sun's radiation. carbon fiber heating cable gives off infrared C, which will in theory replicate the main heat source a green tree python would experience in the wild. But putting it in a steel or aluminium baking tray only resulted in a very hot metal tray and not much radiant heat. Here's where a bit of physics came in. Stefan Boltzmann's law of radiation helped me understand the rate of radiation is dependent on surface area, emissivity, and temperature. We already knew that we can only go so high with temperature before it becomes unsafe to the touch. And the surface area is limited by the size of the enclosure. So it really comes down to emissivity. It turns out that most metals have a poor emissivity, especially smooth, shiny metal. Metal are also good thermal conductors, so that's the reason why metal trays got very hot to the touch, but did not radiate much heat. Glass looks really sleek and has a fairly high emissivity, so I gave it a go. I found some cheap second-hand tempered glass placemats that are black in color, and the black color should also help improve emissivity. Tempered glass should be strong enough to withstand the operation temperature of the heat panel. My design of the radiant heat panel consists of an aluminium frame, a tempered glass surface with carbon fiber heating wire evenly distributed over it, a layer of 10mm thick ceramic fiber insulation blanket to direct heat downwards, and an aluminium composite back panel to enclose it all. There is a panel indicator light wired in so that I could easily tell at a quick glance whether the heating is on or off. There is also a safety thermal switch wired into the circuit to cut off power if it reaches 150 degrees Celsius inside the unit. I also made the power supply to the panels detachable using IEC 7 and IEC 8 connectors to make installing and removing them from the enclosure easier. Overall, these radiant heat panels are capable of putting out a lot of heat, while remaining safe to touch. The fully enclosed design makes them splash proof and easy to clean. And at 3cm thick, they're very low profile, and the black color makes them very discreet. They're a lot of work to make and the materials are not cheap. It might end up being cheaper buying a commercial radiant heat panel ready to go if you're just doing 1 or 2. It only became worthwhile for me because I needed 6 for my latest Green Tree Python project. I haven't had them running for long at the time of making this video, but so far they're doing everything they should. I run them with dimming thermostat, but pulse proportional thermostat should work equally well too. I've learned a lot through the process of making these heat panels, but I feel like there's still so much I don't know. So I'm open to any suggestions and advices, and maybe there will be a second improved version of a DIY radiant heat panel in the future.